Hey everyone, I finished watching the next VR Troopers episode, Save the Trees? I think that was the name of it. Let me look real quick here. Yep, Save the Trees. So it starts off with Grimlord actually it starts with Ryan reminiscing about his father and how they used to hang out in this one part of the forest. Most episodes begin with Ryan thinking about his father and some vague connection, something they did relates to the current episode's plot. So, usually I just skip over it. So anyway, the actual plot starts with Grimlord as Carl Zichter in the real world convincing Mayor Rooney to give him a permit to cut down Crossworld City's forest. And, let's see. He goes to virtual reality, and then orders the monsters to do the same thing. I guess that can't hurt? It's a weird thing. It's kind of redundant. Why bother going through the legal way to do something in the real world if you can just go into the virtual world and get monsters to do it? I don't know. So then later at the newspaper, Woody tells the troopers about what Zichter is planning to do. And then there's a really nice scene here where we see Percy come in, and he explains that the reason why Zichter has control over what Rooney does is because Carl Zichter contributed like $1 jillion to his election campaign. That's a cool little bit of information. I really like that it was delivered from Percy, who it would make sense to come from, because he's the nephew of Mayor Rooney. The whole reason he's here. Also, it's probably the only relevant thing he does in this whole episode. Most of this episode is just him being, like, the goofy comic relief that just is there for filler. So then the troopers go to Zichter to discuss his plans. And I really like this scene because Zichter puts on, like, a nice act for the troopers. He tries to play himself off as being, like, a really understanding and considerate guy who can be reasoned with. And the troopers are kind of surprised by this, and they're like, oh, okay, I guess he's a cool guy. So then they leave, but they are a little bit unsure, and Carl Zichter immediately drops the facade as soon as they're gone, and is like, that forest has to be destroyed. Oh, and the reason he wants to destroy the forest isn't just because he's a evil Captain Planet villain. He actually does have a motive. The forest is on the border between the real world and virtual reality. If he gets rid of the forest, then it'll be easier for his forces to come through, I guess. Also, possibly, nature, like, throughout VR Troopers, there's a weird theme of nature over technology, and I'm thinking that maybe an abundance of trees, like, hinders his ability to send multiple soldiers through or something. Possibly. Fan theory, but, So then the troopers are bike riding through the forest, and they're attacked by Skugs. They fight off the Skugs, and then stop off at the newspaper, so we can see some goofy scenes of Woody and Percy trying to fix a copy machine. Moving on. Let's see, Jeb, when they were in the forest, he picked up some parasites, and they take him to Hart's lab, where Hart scans him and identifies that the parasites are blue fleas, and the blue fleas happen to be an endangered species. So the troopers are able to utilize that information and use it to make the forest a government-protected location. That's a really clever way to solve the problem. Like, it's a real-world solution to a real-world conflict. And it's a thing that's actually worked when, let's see, people want to, like, bulldoze a forest or whatever, but you're able to save it by, there's an endangered species that lives here, you can't bulldoze it. Of course, it's also been twisted and used against people, but, that's a different subject, so back to this. So Grimlord can no longer destroy the forest legally, so he sends out monsters as his backup plan, I guess. So then the troopers are in the forest and they hear something suspicious, so they split up. Of course they do. Ryan goes this way and encounters Chainbot, the latest monster of the day. And then Caitlin and JB go the other direction, and they find Ivar leading an enormous army of monsters. And there's a pretty cool fight between JB and Ivar. I really like this fight. It's a really cool, intense fight, and we get to see what Ivar can do. So anyway, the fight goes on for a while. They fight off the monsters, and Grimlord, I guess, just gives up. It's really weird. Grimlord's plans, like, yeah, he momentarily fails, but it's not like this plan is, like, dead forever. You can easily just try again. Like, just keep sending monsters at the forest. But no, he just gives up. It's a running thing he does, that where after he fails once, it's basically, well, I guess I can never try that again, I'm giving up. Okay. Like, I know why. It's because, like, this is an episodic show. He needs to have a new plot every episode. He can't just keep trying to do the same thing. But yeah, it is kind of a weird hole in the story that I feel like, if the writers had been more experienced, like, if this was later down the line, like, if this was, I don't know, like, a couple years later, like, into Power Rangers in Space or Lost Galaxy or something, the writers that they are bringing over from Power Rangers would have some experience in how to adapt the footage and how to, like keep it kind of consistent and not without many holes. But anyway, they're at the newspaper place, and Jeb reveals that he's lost his fleas, but now Percy has them. Ha ha ha. Funny ending, the end. So anyway, this episode's a pretty decent episode. There's a lot of stuff that I really like about it. I really like that Zictor's plan actually has a motivation and actually makes sense. Although separating, like, having two separate plans, the, like, real-world plan and then the virtual reality send monsters plan, is kind of redundant, and I don't know why he bothered doing, like, one. He could have picked one or the other. And then the other thing I like that it's Percy who reveals Zictor and Mayrooney's connection. It gives him a bit more purpose to be here, other than just the goofball idiot who's fiddling around with the copy machine. I really like the scene where Zictor puts on the nice act for the VR Troopers. It really shows his acting abilities, because in this scene he really comes across as, like, a nice, friendly guy. Whereas usually he's a slimy cartoon villain, but here he seems like, yeah, you can kind of understand how he could have risen to this kind of position, being the kind of person he is. The Troopers using the information about the fleas being endangered and utilizing, like, government protection is, like, a really clever way to solve the conflict in this episode. I really like that. Although, like, the actual conflict is solved more by, like, again, the Metal Heroes footage. Let's see. Oh yeah, the one thing I left out of the plot summary, because it really doesn't matter, after they, like, resolve the conflict with the forest being bulldozed, they're at Hart's lab, and Ryan's testing out this device that can create doubles of himself. It's really weird, and it kind of comes across like, because the previous plot had been resolved, it feels like that episode ended, and then a new one starts up, but it's in the same episode. It's really weird. And I remember this kind of thing happening once in a while with shows, where it feels like it's over, but then a new thing starts. It's a bit of a pacing issue, and the only reason it's there is so that they can explain why Ryan can, like, divide into multiples of himself in the Metalder footage that they use later. I really think this could have been utilized better. The way I was thinking was, at the beginning, there's a lot of just wasting time. Like, it's fine, it's good character stuff with the Troopers. They're fun characters to be with, but I think they could have, I don't know, dropped in a line where they mention, oh, Hart is working on something special, he wants us to go to the lab later and check it out, or something. Or, we could have started at the lab, and then the Troopers are biking from the lab to the newspaper place. And, like, that could have been the start of everything. But instead, they wait until almost the end of the episode to introduce this thing that is ultimately pretty pointless, and I think it only shows up in this one episode. I think maybe they utilize it later to explain, why there's two Caitlins later. I can't remember for sure. So anyway, that's about it for this episode. It's a good one. It's an okay episode. Nothing really stand out, but it's a solid VR Trooper episode. Nothing else to say about it, so that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. See ya.